My brother made a toast and said, "Cheers to the Sánchez family, except Diego, the failure with money." My parents laughed out loud. I raised my glass and responded, "Here's to the failure who will no longer pay your debts." I'm Diego, 34 years old, and my whole life, my family has called me a failure. Not because I lack money, because I've always been fine in that regard, but because I don't have a girlfriend, I don't hang out with friends, and I don't live for parties like my brother Carlos. To my parents, that makes me a loser. I've busted my back working on my property rental business, but to them, my life is a joke. Everything changed at Christmas dinner with a toast they thought was a jest. It was December 24th, and as usual, we gathered at my parents' house. The table was loaded, turkey, mashed potatoes, salad, the usual. I arrived with my orange juice because I don't drink alcohol. Never liked it. I prefer to stay sharp. The house was decked out with lights, and my mother had put up a pristine Christmas tree. My father was already sipping his whiskey, barely paying attention. Carlos showed up late with a brunette I didn't know. No surprise there. My brother doesn't work. He lives for partying and shows up with a new girlfriend every week. My parents applaud him like he's a genius for having a social life. We sat down to eat. Carlos talked about the parties he'd been to, the bars, the women he'd met. My parents looked at him like he was a movie star. My mother smiled. My father patted him on the back. I didn't say a word. I have 10 rental properties. My business is doing better than ever, but they don't care. If I speak, they ignore me or mock me. So I stayed quiet, eating and listening. After dinner came the toast. Carlos stood up with his wine glass, flashing that smug grin he always has. He looked at everyone and said, "Cheers to the Sánchez family, to the good life, except for Diego, the failure with money." The table erupted in laughter. My parents doubled over. My mother nearly choked. Carlos's girlfriend, who had no idea who I was, laughed because everyone else did. Even the neighbors who were invited chuckled. I was at the end of the table, holding my juice, feeling a knot in my chest. It wasn't the first time Carlos mocked me, but this time I was fed up. I was tired of being the family punchline. I looked at my glass. I thought about staying silent, as always, but I couldn't. I stood up, raised my juice, and said in a calm but firm voice, "Here's to the failure who's done paying your debts." The table laughed again. My parents exchanged glances, thinking it was a joke. Carlos let out a cackle and said, "Yeah, right, Diego, keep dreaming." His girlfriend covered her mouth, giggling. Even my father, who rarely speaks, chuckled and said, "Good one, son." No one took me seriously. They thought it was another of my weird moments, that I'd go back to being the same old Diego. I didn't say anything else. I smiled, set my glass down, and left. No one tried to stop me. As I walked to my car, the December cold hit my face. But I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Since we were kids, Carlos has always been the favorite. He's the guy who walks into a bar, and everyone wants to talk to him. He doesn't have a job. He lives off partying, getting drunk, and changing girlfriends like shirts. My parents see him as a god because he knows how to live. I'm the opposite. I don't go out. I don't have friends. I'm not into parties. I prefer working, saving, growing my business. But to my family, that's worthless. I'm the failure because I'm not like Carlos. I started my business at 25 with one property I bought with savings from working since I was 18. Today I have 10, all rented out, and I live comfortably. But I don't just support myself. For years, I've been the one paying for everything in the family. When Carlos wanted a house, I put down the deposit and have been covering the mortgage because he doesn't have a dime. My parents, who never saved, live off a monthly deposit I send them. They've never thanked me. To them, it's my duty, like I'm a money machine. That night, as I drove to my apartment, I thought about everything I've done for them, every payment, every time I dropped my plans to help them, and in return, mockery, laughter, the nickname failure. I couldn't keep going like this. I didn't want to. The next day, I did what I said. I called the bank and canceled Carlos's mortgage payments. I also stopped the deposits to my parents. It wasn't impulsive. I thought it through all night. I knew this would cause a mess, but I was done. If they saw me as a failure, let them figure things out without my money. For the first few days, nothing happened. No one called or texted. I figured they hadn't noticed yet. My mother always takes forever to check her account, and Carlos is so disorganized he probably didn't even know the mortgage payment hadn't gone through. Meanwhile, I went on with my life. My business is my world, the place where no one calls me a failure. But on the fourth day, things shifted. I got a text from my mother. Diego, the deposit didn't come this month. What happened? I didn't reply. Hours later, Carlos called. I didn't pick up, but he left a voicemail. Hey, Diego, the bank says the mortgage wasn't paid. Fix it, man. Don't make me look bad. I listened to the message and smiled. I wasn't fixing anything. The next day, my mother texted again, more desperate. Diego, we need that money. We can't pay the bills. Call me. Carlos sent another message, no longer friendly. What's wrong with you, Diego? This isn't funny. Fix the mortgage. I still didn't respond. I knew this was just the beginning, that things would get worse. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I was ready for whatever came. It was a Monday morning when my phone rang. It was Carlos. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail. I listened out of curiosity. He was furious. Diego, the bank sent a letter. If I don't pay the mortgage in 30 days, they're kicking us out. Fix this or you'll regret it. I deleted the message and kept working. Carlos has no job. He lives off partying and what my parents and I gave him. If he couldn't pay, he'd have to figure it out. That afternoon, my mother texted, Diego, I don't know what's wrong with you, but without the deposit, we can't live. Call me. I didn't reply. I knew if I talked to her, she'd try to guilt trip me, and I was done being their bank. The next day, my father, who rarely gets involved, sent a message. Diego, we're your family. You can't do this to us. His serious tone made me hesitate for a second, but I remembered all the times they laughed at me, called me a failure, while I paid their bills. No, I wasn't backing down. A few days later, Carlos's situation worsened. His girlfriend, Valeria, the brunette from dinner, texted me, Diego, the bank came today. They gave us an eviction notice. Carlos doesn't know what to do. Help us. I was surprised she contacted me, but it didn't sway me. Carlos has never worked. He's always lived off my money. Let him face the consequences. I didn't reply. My parents, meanwhile, were starting to feel the hit. Without my monthly deposit, they couldn't pay for electricity or food. My mother started selling things from the house. An old TV, some unused curtains. My father, who always said he wouldn't work after retiring, had to find something. He ended up as a parking lot security guard, earning peanuts. When I heard, I didn't feel joy but a kind of justice. They finally had to face life without me. The next week, things got more intense. It was a Friday afternoon. I was in my apartment, reviewing papers, when someone pounded on the door like they wanted to break it down. I opened it, and there was Carlos, red-eyed, clothes wrinkled like he hadn't slept. Behind him, Valeria looked at the floor, clearly uncomfortable. What's wrong with you, Diego? Carlos shouted, barging in without permission. The bank's on my back. They're going to kick us out. Fix this now. I crossed my arms. I'm not fixing anything. I bought that house. I paid the deposit, the mortgage for years. If you can't keep it, that's not my problem. Carlos went ballistic. You're a selfish jerk. You've always been a bitter loser. That's why no one likes you. Pay the mortgage, or I swear. Or what? I cut him off, calm. What are you going to do, Carlos? You got nothing, no job, no money, no future. Everything you have is because I paid for it. Valeria spoke softly. Diego, please. It's not just about Carlos. I live there. We have nowhere to go. I looked at her and, for a moment, felt sorry for her. It wasn't her fault Carlos was a mess. But I couldn't keep carrying everyone. I'm sorry, Valeria, I said. This is Carlos's problem. Let him fix it. Carlos glared at me with hatred, took a step toward me, but Valeria grabbed his arm. He let out a yell, turned, and stormed out, with her following. I closed the door and took a deep breath. I knew this wasn't over. A few days later, I heard from a neighbor that the bank didn't wait long. Carlos and Valeria were evicted. They were seen leaving the house with bags of clothes while the bank locked the doors. Carlos, I was told, was screaming and cursing, but he couldn't do anything. I pictured the scene. My brother, who always thought he was king of the world, humiliated, homeless, with nothing. I didn't feel satisfaction, but I didn't feel guilty either. He brought it on himself. My parents were in their own mess. Without my money, they could barely make ends meet. My mother started borrowing from neighbors, and my father's guard job didn't cover the basics. Once, my mother called me crying, saying they couldn't pay the gas bill. I didn't answer. I knew if I gave in, I'd be back to being the Diego who paid for everything while they laughed at me. A couple of weeks later, the confrontation I'd been expecting came. It was a Saturday night. I was in my apartment, going over business numbers, when someone knocked. I opened the door, and there were my parents and Carlos, all three looking ready for war. I didn't invite them in, but they walked in anyway. "Diego, this is over," my mother said, her eyes red. "You can't do this to us. We're your family. How can you leave us like this?" "My family," I replied, cold. "The family that laughed at me every dinner, that called me a failure while I paid your bills?" Carlos stepped forward, pointing at me. "Because of you, they kicked us out of the house, Diego. Valeria left me. I have nothing, and it's all your fault." "No," I said, staring him down. "It's your fault, Carlos. You never worked, never took anything seriously. I gave you everything, and you just mocked me." My father spoke, his voice heavy. "Diego, you're our son. You can't abandon us. We need your help." I shook my head. "No, Dad. You abandoned me. You used me, laughed at me, and now that I'm not giving you money, you suddenly remember I exist? It's not going to work." My mother started crying, but it didn't move me. They were tears of desperation, not regret. Carlos glared at me like he wanted to hit me, but didn't. My father looked down, at a loss for words. The silence felt heavy. "Get out," I said calm. "I have nothing more to say to you." Carlos let out a dry laugh. "You'll regret this, Diego. This isn't over." But he didn't do anything. The three of them left, and I closed the door. After that night, I cut all contact. I blocked their numbers, ignored any messages. I heard Carlos was living in a borrowed room, taking jobs that didn't last. My parents were barely surviving on my father's salary and what my mother made selling things. But I couldn't keep carrying them. It wasn't my responsibility. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my office, reviewing tenant payments, when I noticed something odd in my bank account. There was an $8,000 withdrawal I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a bank error, but when I called, they hit me with a bombshell. The money had been transferred to another account, and the transaction was made from my laptop in my apartment. Someone had broken into my place, used my computer, and stolen my money. It didn't take long to figure out. Only one person could be that brazen, Carlos. It turned out that a month earlier, when I made a quick visit to my parents' house to pick up some old documents, I left my laptop in the car. I didn't lock it, and Carlos, who's always snooping, must have taken advantage. I knew it was him because the bank gave me the account number the money went to, and a quick online search showed it was in the name of one of his ex-girlfriends, a woman named Mariana. He met at one of his parties. It was classic Carlos, using someone else to cover his tracks. But this time, he wasn't getting away with it. I was furious, but stayed calm. I thought about calling the police right away. I had proof. The withdrawal, the account, the fact that only my family knew where I kept my laptop. I could get Carlos in serious trouble, maybe even jail. But something stopped me. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted them to know they couldn't keep walking all over me. I decided to confront them one last time, but on my terms. 2 days later, I set up a meeting. I texted my parents and Carlos. saying I wanted to talk, that maybe we could work things out. I knew they'd bite. They were desperate. I told them to come to my apartment that night. When they arrived, they had a mix of hope and suspicion on their faces. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. My father looked exhausted, like he was carrying the world. Carlos had that smug smile, though it seemed forced. "What do you want, Diego?" Carlos said as soon as he walked in, "If this is about your drama, I don't have time." "Sit down," I said, calmly pointing to the couch. The three of them exchanged glances, but obeyed. I closed the door and stood in front of them, hands in my pockets. "Someone stole $8,000 from my account 2 days ago." I said. "The transaction was made from my laptop here in my apartment, and the money went to an account in the name of Mariana Lopez. Sound familiar, Carlos?" Carlos's face changed. The smile vanished, and for a second I saw a panic in his eyes, but he recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about, Diego. You must be paranoid." My mother jumped in, nervous. "Diego, don't accuse your brother without proof. We're your family. We wouldn't do that to you." "Proof?" I said, pulling out my phone. "The bank gave me the transaction record. Mariana's account is linked to Carlos, and I know it was you because no one else could know where I keep my laptop. You took it from my car when I went to the house, didn't you?" Carlos laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "That's ridiculous. I had nothing to do with it." "Then you won't mind if I call the police?" I said, dialing the number on my phone. I put it on speaker so they could hear the ringing. "I'm going to report the theft, and with the evidence I have, someone's going to jail." My father, who'd been silent, looked up. "Diego, wait. Don't do this. We're your family." "Family?" I said, not lowering the phone. "The family that called me a failure my whole life? The one that laughed at me while I paid your bills? No, Dad, this is over. Return the money, or the police handle it." My mother started crying. "Diego, please don't do this. We can't pay you back. We don't have the money." "Then Carlos will have to explain to the police how my money ended up in his ex's account," I said as the phone kept ringing. The operator was about to pick up. Carlos, who'd been trying to play it cool, broke. "Stop, Diego, stop, damn it," he shouted, jumping up from the couch. "Fine, it was me, but I don't have the money. I already spent it." "Spent it," I said, incredulous. "On what? Another party? Another girlfriend?" "On debts," he said, lowering his voice. "I owed money to some guys. It wasn't for parties. If I didn't pay, they were going to break my legs." "I don't care," I said. "That's not my problem. Return the money, or I talk to police. And if you don't believe me, listen." The phone was still on speaker, and the operator's voice came through. "Emergency services, how can I help you?" My mother stood up, desperate. "Diego, hang up, please. We'll find a way to pay you back, but don't do this." I looked at Carlos, who was now pale. My father had his head in his hands. For a moment, I thought about going through with it, letting the police handle it, but I wanted to end this once and for all. I hung up the phone and looked at them. "You have 1 week to return the $8,000, I said. "If you don't, I go to the police, and I won't hesitate. And after that, I never want to see you again. If you contact me, call me, or come near me, I'll report you. This is over." Carlos opened his mouth to say something, but my mother interrupted, sobbing. "Diego, I'm sorry. We didn't mean for this to happen. Please give us a chance." "No chances," I said. "My whole life, you treated me like garbage. You called me a failure, laughed at me, used me. I paid Carlos's mortgage, gave you money, and you never even said thank you. Instead, you humiliated me. But you know what? The real failure isn't not having friends or not partying. The real failure is living off others like parasites, doing nothing for yourselves. That's you, and I'm done." The silence that followed was heavy. My mother stopped crying. She just stared at me, wide-eyed. My father didn't lift his head. Carlos, for the first time in his life, had nothing to say. My words had hit them, and I knew it. It wasn't just a scolding. It was the truth they never wanted to face. 1 week, I repeated. or the police handle it. Now get out. They stood up slowly, like their bodies were heavy. Carlos gave me one last look, but it wasn't hatred this time. It was something else, like he finally realized he'd lost. They left without a word, and I closed the door. A week later, the money appeared in my account. I don't know how they did it. Maybe my mother sold something else. Maybe Carlos borrowed it. I didn't care. The important thing was they'd done it, and I didn't have to involve the police. After that, I heard nothing from them. I blocked all contact and made sure they couldn't get near my life again. Months passed and my life changed. My business grew. I acquired 2 more properties and started planning an expansion. I worked hard but enjoyed it. For the first time, I felt peace. I didn't have to worry about anyone's debts, mockery, or being the failure. I was just Diego, living for myself. One day, an acquaintance told me something unexpected. Carlos had gotten a job as a delivery driver. Nothing glamorous, but it was something. My parents were still struggling. My father was still at the parking lot, and my mother had started cleaning houses for extra cash. When I heard, I smiled. It wasn't joy at their suffering, but satisfaction. They were finally feeling what it was like to work, to face life without a bank to bail them out. They were finally tasting what they called being a failure, and I was finally free.